Everybody's,
Suzanne, we're just testing. Can you hear us out there okay?
so that should be just,
Anyway,
Yep, I can hear you fine.
We'll go back on mute for now.
fun.
We're on mute. All right, Mr. Chair, looks like it's 1 o'clock.
Right, we have 1 o'clock, so we'll call the meeting to order, June 25th meeting of the Board of Water and Natural Resources. I'd like to welcome everyone today participating in today's meeting or listening online. The meeting is streaming on SD.net, a service of South Dakota Public Broadcasting. For the benefit of our online listeners, I request that all participants please identify themselves when speaking during the meeting. Participants should also remember to unmute their microphones only when speaking. Meeting is being recorded and the audio will be made available online following the meeting. To find the audio recording online, do a web search for South Dakota Boards and Commissions portal, follow the link and select the name of the board. If the members of the Board Legislative Oversight Committee are participating in remotely, please acknowledge your presence at this time. Oh, very good. Welcome today. Glad you're here.
Your mic on.
I'd have to push them.
Did all that and I did it so well.
Yeah, there's no sound on it.
Do I need to repeat myself or are we good to go?
Let's try it again, yes, if there's no sound.
Okay, I'll call the meeting to order, the June 25th Board of Water and Natural Resources. I would like to welcome everyone participating in today's meeting or listening online. The meeting is streaming live on SD.net, a service of South Dakota Public Broadcasting. For the benefit of our online listeners, I request that all participants please identify themselves when speaking during the meeting. Participants should also remember to unmute their microphones only when speaking. The meeting is being recorded and the audio will be made available following the meeting. To find the audio recording, do a web search for South Dakota Boards and Commissions portal, follow the link and select the name of the board. If members of the Board Legislative Oversight Committee are participating in remotely, please acknowledge your presence at this time.
Hi, Representative Yuri Bulk from Rapid City.
Very good. We're glad you're here with us today.
Thank you.
We need a motion to approve the agenda.
Bernard would so move.
Second.
Burns.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor with an aye?
Aye.
Hi.
Opposed? Motion carries. Approval of the minutes from the March 26, 2026 board meeting. We have a motion of approval.
So moved.
We have a motion and a second. Are there any comments or questions? Hearing none. All in favor with an aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We're now in a public comment period. If you have any comments about today's meeting, questions that are coming up, something that's going on, please make your comments at this time. Again, this is not a question and answer. It is not a time for approval. It is a time for comments. Do we have any comments?
There's 2 people online saying they straight up can't hear us.
I can hear okay if that helps, but
They may need to check their settings. Thank you, Representative Yurko.
Okay. We are on item number 4, just following a public comment period. And we have some new staff to introduce. Tina.
Yes, Mr. Chair, we got some staffing updates, for the environmental funding program. I'll start with the sad news. Casey Kaler, one of our grant and loan specialists, has, taken a position over at the Secretary of State's office. So he's no longer with the program. And, Cheyenne Ritzman has, left the program as well. However, we have hired some new staff. We have Chloe Ryan. She will be an engineer within the program. You can wave, stand up.
Welcome.
And then we have Adash Nair. He will be one grant and loan specialist. And then another one is Leander Austin, our second grant and loan specialist.
Very good. Welcome aboard. Okay, item number 5, amendment for the fiscal year 2025 clean water SRF, 2025 drinking water SRF intended use plan. Andy.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Start with our amendments to the 2025 Clean Water SRF and 2025 Drinking Water SRF intended use plans. Both of these intended use plans were originally approved by the board in November of 2024 and have been amended several times during calendar year 2025. At the time the intended use plans were approved, there were insufficient projects to fully utilize the SRF program funds for the emerging contaminants grant that are available. When we originally approved the 2025 intended use plans, we weren't at that time requesting those funds, or as we've done in many cases in the past, transfer of the clean water funds to the drinking water SRF program where we've had a higher demand for those projects. In March 2026, I can't hear what's going on. All right, we're gonna pause for just a second.
Sophie left and rejoined and said that she can hear. And then someone else. Yeah, because.
It's on their end.
Yeah, it's gotta be on their end and not in the room, so since half the people can hear us and half can't, so I guess if you're not able to hear us, hopefully try rejoining. Bailey, I'd recommend maybe saying that to everybody, just step out and rejoin if they're not able to hear. All right, apologize. So the 2025 intended use plans, again, emerging contaminants funds is the primary reason we're here addressing this with the board. In March of 2026, the board placed eligible projects on the 2026 intended use plan, which would be able to utilize a portion of those emerging contaminants funds. And we actually did fund a couple projects one project in March as well. So what we are recommending is making changes to the narrative section of the intended use plan to request, one, the ability to apply and recommendation for use of the emerging contaminants funds, and with the clean water SRF portion of those, that they be transferred to the drinking water SRF, again, where we have a need and demand for those funds that are able to be utilized. So with that, staff would request change the proposed amendments to the 2025 clean water SRF intended use plan and 2025 drinking water SRF intended use plan be approved.
Do we have a motion to follow staff recommendation?
So moved, Drews.
Second, Lanning.
We have a motion and a second. Are there any comments or questions?
So we're pushing the 2025 money to 26?
No, the 2025 money remains 2025 money. It's still available to us at this time. And what we're doing is recommending that we apply for those remaining funds that we had not originally, and that we transfer the clean water SRF portion of those funds to the drinking water SRF portion or funds where we have eligible projects that can utilize them.
But then they'll still be processed as 2025.
They still are considered 2025 through EPA, yes.
Any other comments or questions? Hearing none, all in favor with an eye?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item number 6. Amendments to the state water plan, 2026 clean water SRF and 2026 drinking water SRF intended use plan. Andy?
I will start off by saying that this will take 3 separate actions at the end, Mr. Chair. Water projects, which will require state funding or need state support for categorical grant or loan funding, need to be on the state water plan. The Board of Water and Natural Resources annually approves projects for placement onto the state water facilities plan and provides for amendment of projects onto the plan. Placement of a project on the state water plan by the board provides no guarantee of funding. The projects placed onto the plan at this meeting will remain on the facilities plan through December 2027. Projects seeking a clean water or drinking water state revolving fund loan must be included on the project priority list of the intended use plan. The state water plan applications are used to determine which projects should be amended onto the state revolving fund project priority list. There were 5 state water plan applications received by the May 1st, 2026 deadline. A list of those projects was included in the board packet, and the map on the screen shows the locations of those projects as well. As I present the applications, I will also identify those projects to be recommended for placement on the clean water SRF and drinking water SRF project priority lists. First project is from Crooks. They currently only have 1 connection to Minnehaha Community Water Corporation, which provides its bulk water service. This results in a lack of redundancy for the community if the connection would be compromised or have an issue. This project would install a second connection to MCWC and install 2.5 miles of 12-inch transmission main to connect to the existing distribution system for the community. Project would be placed on the drinking water intended use plan with 15 points, an estimated loan of $3,800,000 at 4% for 30 years. Our second application is from Millbank. They have existing wells that serve as the water sources for the city, and several of these wells exceed secondary maximum contaminant levels for iron, manganese, sulfate, and total dissolved solids. These secondary contaminants contribute to poor water aesthetics for residential users and can also cause issues with industry and healthcare facilities in the community being able to utilize the water for their needs. This project would construct a new treatment plant designed to remove iron and manganese to below secondary MCLs while utilizing some of the facilities at their existing treatment site to reduce costs. Project would be placed on the drinking water SRF intended use plan with 164 points, an estimated loan of $10 million at 3.75% for 20 years. Our next application is from Randall Community Water District. They currently operate 2 separate treatment plants. The Platte plant is a 12 million gallon per day capacity with current upgrades that are being completed, and the Pickstown plant with a 6 million gallon per day capacity. Randall would like to increase the Pickstown treatment plant capacity and raw water intake capacity. The upgrades would result in the Pickstown plant also having a 12 million gallon per day capacity for a total of 24 within the system. The existing 18 million gallon treatment capacity is sufficient to meet their current peak day usage needs. And as such, this project is considered primarily for future growth and is not eligible for drinking water SRF consideration or inclusion on the drinking water SRF intended use plan. However, the project is eligible for placement on the state water plan. This project would not be recommended for placement on the drinking water SRF intended use plan. They are their total project amount, though, is an estimated $31,907,000. Our next application is from Webster. The city's existing water meters are beyond their useful life and the city is planning to replace all meters with a new remote read system and incorporated billing software with that. They'd be placed on the drinking water intended use plan with 90 points, an estimated loan of $908,000 at 2.75% for 10 years. And our final application is from White. They're proposing to make storm sewer improvements within the central portion of the community to allow for proper stormwater management. Project would include approximately 2,000 feet of storm sewer pipe and associated appurtenances. This would be placed on the clean water SRF intended use plan with 6 points, estimated loan of $325,000 at 4% for 30 years. First action is staff recommendation for placing all 5 projects onto the 2026 State Water Facilities Plan.
We have a motion to follow staff recommendation.
So move Bernhardt.
Second, Drews.
We have a motion and a second. Any comments or questions? Hearing none. All in favor with an eye?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Our second action is for clean water intended use plan additions. Staff is recommending, as you can see in the middle of the screen currently, the addition of the White project onto the project priority list for the clean water SRF IUP. I would note we did make adjustments within the narrative section. We found out final official allotments from EPA of what our final amounts are for 2026. So those were adjusted. I was pretty close on my estimate. I believe I was estimating 3.5 million and they ended up at 3,507,000 for the year. So I was pretty close. Few slight tweaks then associated with that. So
We have a motion to follow staff recommendation of placing White on the plan.
So moved, Drews. Second, Jennings.
We have a motion and a second. Any comment or question? Hearing none. All in favor with an eye?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
last action on this item is staff recommendation for the addition of the 3 projects shown on the screen onto the project priority list. Again, noting that Randall Community Water District is not eligible for drinking water SRF consideration, so it is not included on that list. And again, narrative adjustments were made for final drinking water SRF 2026 allotments. I wasn't quite as close. I was within about 50,000 on that side. So still fairly close on 3.8 million. So
We have a motion to follow staff recommendation.
So moved, Jones.
Second, Lanning.
We have a motion and a second. Any comments or questions? Hearing none. All in favor with an eye?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Okay, item number 7, amendment to shared resources, ARPA grant 2022, ARPA 192, Andy.
right. Before we get going, just because we're kind of starting in on funding recommendations, I'm going to quickly go over kind of where we start today for available funds, especially with related to the ARPA dollars to start with. So on the screen here, we have our kind of non-SRF subsidy funds available. Top part is those ARPA dollars due to a few projects coming back with some lower than originally estimated project costs and finishing out. We have just a little over 206, almost $207,000 available. And so that's the action item we'll be taking up next to reallocate, make sure we spend those dollars, which is coming up soon. The consolidated program, a little over $2.6 million to start today. The 2026 general funds for water, wastewater and stormwater grants, those were fully allocated at the board's March 26th meeting. And then the drinking water emerging contaminants for smaller disadvantaged communities, which again is separate from the state revolving fund portion of dollars that sound extremely similar. We have authority to utilize a little over $22.3 million. We do have some upcoming projects for both those and the drinking water SRF. Not in today's meeting, but I'm anticipating in one of our next couple of meetings that we'll be making some awards from those categories. On the next page, we have the drinking water SRF principal forgiveness dollars. We do have available to any borrower. We do not have any request for drinking water funding today, so we won't be dipping into these, but we do have a little over $56,000 available to any borrower. That's primarily due to my slight miscalculation on how much our grant was going to be from EPA. Available for disadvantaged communities, there's a minimum and maximum allowables available. We have allocated the minimum required amount. We do have some funds available towards the maximum. I don't really anticipate us probably recommending much awards from that, especially from the standpoint of the next section below, the BIL supplemental principal forgiveness for disadvantaged communities. We still have over $16 million that we are required to provide out for that. So I think we'll be utilizing that primarily in the future. BIL emerging contaminants principal forgiveness, again, related to those transfers. In total, though, we have about $9.5 million available when we have projects in seeking those funds. And then we have the lead service line funding, currently still a little over $28 million in total available of subsidy. However, we remain having a lack of interested projects for those funds, primarily due to some of the requirements that are associated with them. And many of our systems, thankfully, not having major issue with lead service lines, which is a good thing. Moving on to the next page, clean water principal forgiveness. From the base program, we have minimums and maximums available again. We have met the required minimum. The maximum is a little over $1.85 million available. We will be, if there's a need to utilize that, we may recommend that. However, also keeping an eye on anything you continue taking out above what we need to provide lessens capacity in the future with revolving funds from a loan. So keeping that in mind, the BIL supplemental for disadvantaged communities, we have awarded on the clean water side that it's a much lesser dollar in total than the drinking water. So those dollars went a lot faster as well. And then the BIL emerging contaminants for principal forgiveness, we are showing $1,043,000 available. That's from the 2026 allotment. However, we'll be submitting information, and that's already in the intended use plans to transfer those dollars to the drinking water program as well. So that by the next time we meet, will probably be a $0. So any questions on that before I go on to the actual Item 7, ARPA amendment? All right. The American Rescue Plan Act funds were originally provided from $600 million by the 2022 legislature and Senate Bill 62. In the 2023 legislative session, Senate Bill 20 was passed, which provided the board discretion on the reallocation of those funds. Reallocated funds may only be provided to existing ARPA grant recipients, which is required by the U.S. Treasury requirements, though. There is currently $206,749.07 of unobligated ARPA funds. And again, that's due to a few projects that have deobligated their funds coming in under cost and completing. Shared Resources has submitted a request for additional ARPA grant consideration. On April 13, 2022, Shared Resources was awarded a $69,983,400 drinking water SRF loan and a $38,276,600 ARPA grant. That ARPA grant has been amended 3 times in June 2024, May 25, and January 2026 for additional funds, bringing the total current ARPA grant to $50,942,148. Shared Resources is a joint effort between Minnehaha Community Water Corporation and the Big Sioux Community Water System. Project includes an 8 million gallon treatment plant, well field distribution pipeline, and 2 storage tanks. Shared Resources will treat and deliver water to both systems, and they will then distribute that water to their existing customer base. They do have remaining eligible costs to utilize the additional ARPA grant dollars and get those expended within the ARPA deadlines, which must be expended by the end of this calendar year. Staff recommendation is to award an additional $206,749.07 in ARPA grant funds to Shared Resources, bringing the total ARPA grant to $51,148,897.07. Not sure if we have any representatives from Shared Resources that would like to address the board at this time. hoped to be there, but may have had something come up. So they were very thankful to be reached out to, I know, and certainly appreciate the board's consideration for providing these additional funds to them. And from staff's perspective, we have a limited number of projects left and a limited number of larger projects to make sure these funds get expended and we utilize all the funds fully for the benefit of the state.
Very good. We have a motion to follow staff recommendation with moving $206,749.07 to shared resources.
Motion Jennings.
Second, Lanning.
We have a motion and a second. Any comments or questions? Hearing none. All in favor with an eye.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carries. Item number 8. Tina.
All right, Mr. Chair and members of the board, today I have the honor to do the sanitary storm sewer facility funding applications. And we'll start with the City of Sioux Falls. The City of Sioux Falls is requesting funding for upgrades at the water reclamation facility. The City of Sioux Falls water reclamation facility has been going through several upgrades over the past few years. In November 2018, a condition assessment of the facility, including the primary clarifiers, was conducted. The report concluded the existing primary clarification system is showing signs of wear, and the system is limiting capacity to less than 44 million gallons per day and is a process bottleneck. The city is proposing to demolish the current primary clarification system and construct 3 new 95-foot primary clarifiers. In addition, a new primary clarifier sludge pumping building, new effluent splitter box, and a new effluent splitter box will be constructed. The new primary clarifier system should have a total capacity of 76 million gallons per day. Additionally, a new odor control system will be installed for this system. The total project amount is $51,900,000, which is the amount requested. Staff recommendation is to award a $51,900,000 clean water SRF loan at 3.75% interest for 20 years. The city has pledged system revenues for repayment of the loan. The City of Sioux Falls has adopted rates through the year 2027. The rates in 2027 will be $50.85 for 5,000 gallons usage. Staff analysis indicates that using those rates adopted through 2027, the City of Sioux Falls has over 150% debt coverage. The loan would be contingent upon the borrower adopting a bond resolution and the resolution becoming effective. If there's any representatives for the City of Sioux Falls on the line, now would be your time to address the board. Sophie, are you there?
Yeah, I know the City of Sioux Falls was trying to get on, but thank you for your consideration of this request, and I will try to answer any questions I could.
A motion to follow staff recommendation.
So move Drews.
Second, Bernhardt.
We have a motion and a second. Any comments or questions? Hearing none. All in favor with an eye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Right, up next, we have the City of Hecla. City of Hecla is requesting funding for phase 3 of its wastewater collection improvements project. The City of Hecla is proposing to improve their sewer collection system with relining and repairing at least 11,000 feet of sewer line and a full lift station replacement. This will reduce the amount of inflow and infiltration into the collection system and will correct hazard and safety issues with the current lift station. The total project amount is $2,500,000, which is the amount requested. Staff recommendation is to award a $2,500,000 clean water SRF loan at 4% interest for 30 years with principal forgiveness of 80%, not to exceed $2 million. The city has pledged a project surcharge for repayment of the loan. Current rates are $81.45 per 5,000 gallons usage. Later in this meeting, the board will take action upon the city of Hekla's request to deobligate their Clean Water 03 loan. Changes in the project have occurred, and the project scope of the Clean Water 03 loan no longer reflects the needs of the city. This recommendation is based on the Clean Water 03 loan being deobligated. The Clean Water 03 loan was for a similar amount of money and had a $15.95 surcharge, bringing rates to that $81.45 per 5,000 gallons usage. Due to the change in interest rates that have happened since the 03 loan was awarded, staff indicates that a surcharge of $16.50 is needed to provide the required debt coverage. Also, since the 03 loan application, the city is anticipating higher operation and maintenance costs. Therefore, our staff analysis indicates that with the increased surcharge and the increased operation and maintenance, the overall user rates will be $84.15 for 5,000 gallons usage. I will note that with the $15.95 surcharge, the city will still need to make a new resolution to adopt the new surcharge, but that old surcharge can then go away because they will no longer have that 03 loan. So we're trying to swap basically those two loans. The loan would be contingent upon the borrower adopting a bond resolution and the resolution becoming effective, and contingent upon the borrower establishing a surcharge at a level sufficient to provide the required debt coverage. If we have any representatives for the city of Hekla on the line, now would be your time to address the board.
On behalf of the city, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity. This is huge for the city to ensure they have a lasting sanitary sewer system.
Very good. Thank you for being available today.
Could you identify yourself? Sorry, so for the record.
Matthew Mazurek, A2S. I don't believe anyone from the city's on today.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Do we have a motion to follow staff recommendation?
So moved, Jones.
Second, Lanning.
We have a motion and a second. Any additional comment or question? Hearing none. All in favor with an eye?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Before we move on to the next item, Mr. Chair, I'd like to go over the funding summary, since those were our funding applications for the SRF programs. So as Andy mentioned before doing the ARPA amendments, this now shows that we awarded the ARPA amendment to shared resources. So our balance on the ARPA rescue plan grants is 0. We did not have any grants towards the consolidated program or funding for the 2026 general fund or the small drinking water emerging contaminants funding. Under the drinking water program, as Andy mentioned, we did not have any drinking water applications this round. So all of those balances remain the same. And then under the clean water principal forgiveness, as we mentioned with the Hekla award, the $2 million that was awarded in principal forgiveness matches the $2 million that was awarded in the Clean Water 03 loan. So that is basically a wash and the balances remain the same.
That meant to be a fund?
No, this is a mistake on my part when I put this together. And that $2 million has been basically double counted. So the Hekla $2 million has not been reverted back into it, but $2 million was removed out of it. So if that makes sense, those negative balances, if you add them up, are $2 million. I apologize for that.
I don't know how we missed that during
Yeah.
the run through.
Doesn't happen until later in the meeting, right, Andy?
No, so apologize for that, but we are not negative $2 million of principal forgiveness. We are where the balances were. We just need to correct that discrepancy. I apologize.
One comment here. This last swap really indicates how you work with the various communities on where they should be getting the money from, how they should be getting, what they should be using it for. And so it's fun to be able to watch that happen. So I just wanted to make that comment and congratulations and job well done there.
Thanks, yeah. We did a little back and forth with Hecla and their engineer Matt and their planning district person Ted Dickey to figure out how to best approach this. And once we came to kind of got together and figured it out, this was a pretty good approach for them and kind of left us at about the same where well, not according to that, but eventually we will be right where we were before too. So, all right.
Very good.
All right, solid waste applications. We'll start off real quickly with solid waste available funds. About $2.5 million available to start today's meeting. We have one funding application to present to the board today, and that is from the Department of Agriculture and Natural Resources. Some of you on the board may remember we were here last year recommending an award to DANR for what is essentially additional funding for this activity. DANR's inspection, compliance, and remediation program is planning to work with local entities, especially firefighting entities, to collect and dispose of PFAS foam or potential other PFAS products. And they will then collect those and have them properly disposed of so that that chemical is no longer a likely threat to be released into the environment. There are now some pretty good alternative products out there for firefighting agencies to use, which is a good thing. And so we can get those PFAS foams, which have been a real contributor to some of those PFAS issues that you hear about around the country, out of the systems. We did leave it open that if not all funds are necessary for PFAS removal, we could look to use a portion of the funds for regional landfills, for working on some waste tire cleanups, potentially for school districts to remove old and potential chemical hazards they have, or as we've done in the past with both of those activities. And in a few cases, if something unforeseen arises with a solid waste cleanup of some sort that is deemed necessary, we can work with whatever that entity is to take care of that cleanup and removal if need be. They've been these funds, we don't get them every year, but we have gotten them several times, and they've been beneficial in a variety of different ways to help out with some things around the state. And right now that PFAS removal efforts has been a good use of them. They did a big cleanup activity last year with the funds. There is about $80,000 from last year's grant remaining. However, based on a list they have of known areas and what they're anticipating, that would not be sufficient to meet the needs for this upcoming round of collection. Total project amount is $250,000, and that is the amount requested. I would note that the 2026 legislature approved Senate Bill 37, which was the omnibus bill, and that allowed the ability to provide up to $250,000 to DANR at 100% of project costs, which is above the normal 80% threshold. Again, these are funds, going out directly to do some direct on-site assistance and getting rid of some poor materials out there. Staff recommendation is to award a solid waste management program grant at 100%, not to exceed $250,000. And I will do my best to represent the department and answer questions if the board has.
Good question, Andy.
Yes.
So even though we use the word cleanup in here, it's not really cleaning up waterways or property or anything. It's really taking these chemicals out of that have been essentially in storage at these different areas. Is it replacing those or just taking those out of
So replacement is their responsibility. There's been some new products though that they're able to get. There's actually been a effort, I believe it's by the South Dakota Soybean Council or Association. I could have that wrong, but it's a soy-based product that's proven to be meet the requirements for that. So it's kind of a natural-based product that can do essentially what these chemicals could, and that seems like a better way to handle that too. So, and there's some other products coming out as well that meet their needs. So,
Is this pretty well cleaned up, most of this PFAS?
they're working on it. I think they believe that with this funding, we can get around to most of the firefighting agencies, especially those smaller volunteer ones. Some of the larger entities, it might not be able to get quite all of that taken care of, but a lot of those have a little more resources to do some things on their own as well. I believe they focus more on the smaller volunteer, smaller, municipal airfield types of areas that have these chemicals and don't have the means to get rid of them, and is pretty cost prohibitive for them to do it too on their own.
Thank you.
We have a motion to follow staff recommendation.
Motion Jennings.
Second, Bernhardt.
We have a motion and a second. Any additional comments or questions? Hearing none. All in favor with an eye?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Well, just real briefly, the available funds left, obviously, we just approved a $250,000 award. You'll see a $260,000 there. That time, I did do that one intentionally. We have an action item coming up a little bit later on the agenda, which is anticipation of showing what that would do for the CCOG private entity loan review. If that is approved by the board, that would be an additional $10,000. So that's showing there now, but not official until you guys take action in a little bit.
Okay, item number 10, update authorized representatives to act on behalf of the board.
All right, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. In May 2019, staff worked with the Attorney General's office to create a document that designates authorized representatives to perform specific duties on behalf of the board and the district. Specific staff are authorized to perform duties on behalf of the Board of Water and Natural Resources and the South Dakota Conservancy District through a series of forms from our trustee, U.S. Bank, and designation letters from the department secretary. Due to staff changes, and as we've introduced a lot of new staff to you, the authorized representatives document needed to be updated. This document outlines the document outlining the designated staff for certain activities was included in your board packet. The staff recommendation is to approve the updated authorized representatives document outlining the authority for staff to perform specific duties on behalf of the Board of Water and Natural Resources and the South Dakota Conservancy District.
We have a motion to follow staff recommendation.
So moved, Bernhardt.
Second, Jones.
We have a motion and a second. Any comments or questions? Hearing none. All in favor with an eye?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item number 11, Planning District Joint Powers Agreement.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is an item that comes up every so often and a very important one to our program and the assistance that is provided by our planning districts throughout the state. I'm not just saying that because many of them are listening, but they do a great service for DANR as well as for the communities we work with. So certainly want to thank them for their long assistance and relationship that we have with them. The board is contracted with the planning districts to assist entities with state revolving fund applications and administration since 2005, and Davis-Bacon monitoring activities since 2009 when it became required. Pursuant to intended use plans and omnibus bill, the board has allocated funds to each of the planning districts to continue to provide this assistance to recipients of SRF funding. The agreements that and with that, the current agreements expire on June 30th, 2026. Rich requires us to recommend approval for a new agreement to begin July 1st, 2026. And that will run for 5 years through June 30th, 2031. We've worked with the planning districts to have them inform of us of what they believed was a reasonable increase in cost from the previous 5-year area. Originally, from the 2021 contract, we provide them in total $13,100 per loan for their assistance in administration, application preparation, and Davis-Bacon monitoring. The new agreement would be broken into 2 separate sections. The first for SRF application and administration reimbursement with $13,000 per loan. That reimbursement is subject to 3 separate installment payments. The first is based on approval of a loan by the board. The second is based on the first disbursement of funds to the borrower. And then the third is the final disbursement of funds to the borrower. The agreement would then also provide $2,000 per loan application to the planning districts in 2 different installments. The first, again, based on that first disbursement of funds to the borrower. And the second is based at the end of the project upon receipt of the contractor's payrolls and employee interviews, assuring that all documentation is provided to DNR and the recipient. Davis-Bacon monitoring requirements are made to the planning district if no community development block grant funding is part of the project, which is the case for most of our projects, but there are a few because CDBG also pays them for that activity. So a total of $15,000 per loan, up from the prior $13,100. However, we believe that was a pretty good bargain for the assistance that they provide. Staff proposes to enter into 6 separate joint powers agreements with each of the planning districts for SRF application and administration and Davis-Bacon monitoring. The amount for each of the contracts was listed on the title page. That amount takes into account that there is remaining funds to be dispersed from loans that have been awarded previously, as well as a rough estimate of how much funding and loans the board will award in the future to each planning district. It's one of those things that we have a pretty cloudy crystal ball on that. So we take our best effort, and then, we've done it a couple times in the last few years, had to amend for some increased costs. And if that would be the case, we would come back to the board and request that increase, primarily just based on the fact that they've had more demand from that district than we originally anticipated. With that, staff would recommend that the board approve the joint powers agreements with the planning districts for SRF loan application and administration and Davis-Bacon monitoring. We have several planning districts on the line. If you'd like to say anything to the board at this point in time, I'd certainly welcome you to do that. Otherwise, I'll stand by for questions as well.
Hi, Andy and board. This is Sophie from CCOG. Just wanted to say we appreciate your consideration, and we really enjoy working with Andy and his staff. They're really great partners of ours. So thank you.
Very good. Do we have a motion to follow staff recommendation to approve the joint powers agreement?
So moved.
Leonie.
We have a motion and a second. Any comments or questions?
Mr. Chair, I'd just like to make a comment that I really appreciate what the planning districts do, and I'm glad they're working in cooperation with DNR. They do a wonderful job for our communities throughout the state.
Completely agree.
Any other comments? Hearing none. All in favor with an eye?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item number 12.
Hey, another joint powers agreement for renewal. This one is a little bit different. The Southeastern Council of Governments for a private entity loan review for solid waste management program. In June of 2022, the board entered into the current contract joint powers agreement for $7,500 with the Southeastern Council of Governments to provide private entity loan review services, and that contract expires June 30th, 2026 and cannot be extended. We've had this contract in place over the years, several different times. Private entities, private for-profit entities are only allowed to apply for any of DANR's and the board's programs through the solid waste management program. It's not something that our staff regularly sees, and private finances are definitely different than government type finances and those of nonprofit rural water system types entities. So it's not an area we have as much expertise with. CCOG, through their revolving loan fund program, has staff that regularly work with private entities, and they do loan reviews for their own funding. So it's been a very beneficial thing for us to have somebody to assist us in review and making recommendations to this board that we believe are fully supported and a sound investment of the funds when we are recommending that. Section 4 of the 2026 legislative omnibus bill, Senate Bill 37, appropriated a total of $3.4 million from the Water Environment Fund to the Solid Waste Management Program. Codified Law, Chapter 46A-1 authorizes the Solid Waste Management Program as a whole and allows the board to use funds from the appropriation to contract for services to administer the programs, including processing and reviewing private entity solid waste loan applications. Staff worked with the legal counsel to prepare the joint powers agreement to place $10,000 of the solid waste management program funds under agreement with the Southeastern Council of Governments. This will be effective July 1st, 2026 through June 30th, 2030, a 4-year period to match up with the appropriation cycle. And the agreement will limit the reimbursement rate to $100 per hour and caps the review of each application at 15 hours without prior written approval. Staff would recommend approval of the joint powers agreement with the Southeastern Council of Governments for Solid Waste Management Program private entity loan reviews.
We have a motion to follow staff recommendations.
Motion Jennings.
Second, Lanning.
I have a motion and a second. Any comments or questions? Hearing none.
And they have a dozen or so of these over a 4-year period? Is that what
Actually, in this last 4-year period, I believe we had 2 or 3. So we did not use the full $7,500. I want to say we used right around $2,000. So those funds do revert back into the programs. So we're not really losing the full 10,000 even, but yeah, we use it as necessary. We don't have a lot of them, which is again, another reason that it's so beneficial to us is that when we have that, their expertise comes in very handy, and they're very responsive and work with us very well to do that as well. So.
Any other questions? Hearing none. All in favor with an eye?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Item number 13, Dupree's request to deobligate. Tina.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On June 23rd, 2022, the Board of Water and Natural Resources awarded Dupree a $1,314,452 Clean Water SRF loan for its wastewater system improvements project. On June 4th, 2026, DANR staff received a letter from the City of Dupree requesting to deobligate the clean water loan. This letter stated the city had sufficient funding for the projects that are currently being worked on. Staff recommendation is to rescind Resolution 2022-339, which awarded the Clean Water SRF loan C461247-03.
We have a motion to follow staff recommendation.
So moved.
Jones.
Second, Lanning.
We have a motion and a second. Any comments or questions? Hearing none. All in favor with an eye?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right. Hecla's request.
On March 27th, 2025, the Board of Water and Natural Resources awarded Hecla a $2,500,000 Clean Water SRF loan for its Phase 2 wastewater improvement project. On March 31st, 2026, DNR staff received a letter from the city of Hecla requesting to deobligate the loan. As mentioned during item 8, the project scope has changed and this loan is no longer needed. Staff recommendation is to rescind resolution number 2025-40, which awarded the Clean Water SRF loan C461276-03.
We have a motion to follow staff recommendation to deobligate the Hecla loan.
So moved, Bernhardt.
Second, Jennings.
We have a motion and second. Any comments or questions? Hearing none. All in favor with an eye?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item 15, Presho.
On June 23rd, 2022, the Board of Water and Natural Resources awarded Presho a $105,000 consolidated loan for its water meter replacement project. On April 21st, 2026, DNR staff received a letter from the town of Presho requesting to deobligate the consolidated loan. The town utilized local funds for the portion of the project that would have required the loan, and the loan is no longer necessary. Staff recommendation is to rescind resolution 2022-377, which awarded the consolidated loan 2023L-203.
Have a motion to follow staff recommendation.
So moved, Lanning.
Have a motion and a second. Any comments or questions? Hearing none. All in favor with an eye?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Item 16.
Sorry, you're fine. Sure is. Thank you, Chairman and members of the board. My name is Josh Strobel. Oh, sorry. Thank you, Chairman and members of the board. My name is Josh Strobel. I work for the DNR Watershed Protection Program, and today I'll be talking about South Dakota's Surface Water Quality Assessment Report and some water quality improvement and protection strategies. So this map that I'm showing you right here highlights all of the water quality monitoring sites that we have visited over the last 50 years. This represents about 7,700 sites, and this is a mixture of multiple lakes, rivers, and streams across the state. And one thing I do want to mention about this is all of this sampling would not be possible without multiple partners across the state helping us collect this data, such as water development districts, different volunteer monitoring groups, and then also landowners and producers. So let's get into the actual report. The South Dakota Surface Water Quality Assessment Report is a report due to EPA April 1st of every even year as part of the Clean Water Act. This report kind of highlights all of the water bodies that we're sampling and collecting data on in the state, and then takes water quality criteria and beneficial uses on those water bodies to see if they are meeting criteria and supporting their beneficial uses. A beneficial use refers to the designated use of a water body. So for example, if you have a designated beneficial use of immersion recreation on a water body, that means you should be able to visit this water body and immerse yourself fully with activities such as swimming. Now, each beneficial use that's assigned to a given water body comes with a specific water quality criteria. One of the water quality criteria that's associated with the immersion recreation beneficial use is E. coli. Now, E. coli has a bacteria limit of 235 colony forming units. And later in the presentation, I'll kind of talk about where that number comes from and why that's so important. So when we're looking at lakes and streams and rivers across the state, when we're looking at lakes, we look at a 5 or a 10-year time frame for the data. And when we're looking at streams, we look at a 5-year time frame. And what's nice about this variable time frame is it allows variability within these water bodies. And it also allows us to make sure that when we are looking at comparing criteria, that we have enough data to actually look at and make a water quality based decision. So after kind of looking at the sample data that you've collected and comparing it back to the water quality criteria, you can then make an assessment result on this water body, deciding if it's fully supporting or not supporting its beneficial use. If you have 90% or more of your samples meeting or under that 235 E. coli value, you then know that your beneficial use would be fully supporting. If you have 10% or more of your samples collected in those time periods over that 235 E. coli value, you then know that your assessment result would be a non-support situation. So let's actually talk about what support and non-support truly means. Here I have a picture of Lake Pactola. Looks like a pretty nice summer day. The water quality looks relatively good from the shoreline, and there even seems to be a kayak pulled up to the shore, which may indicate that someone's recreating at this water body. The interesting thing though about Lake Pactola is, as of the 2026 report, it's actually non-supporting for its beneficial use of temperature. So just because a given water body has a designated non-support on it, does that mean that that water body is unusable or not providing any recreational value to the public? No. Non-support does not necessarily mean that the water body is unusable. In a lot of our non-supporting waters across the state, there's actually only a few samples that are exceeding that water quality criteria. An example of this is in the 2026 report. Big Sioux River segment 14 near Harrisburg had 22.5% of its E. coli samples exceed over that 5-year time period. But something to note about that as well is that means that in that 5-year time period, roughly about 80% or less of those E. coli samples actually were meeting their water quality criteria. And again, a lot of the non-support water bodies in the state are also really productive fisheries. Bitter Lake, for example, Bitter Lake is non-support for its aquatic fish life use due to the mercury in fish tissue parameter. But in 2019, it still provided about 40,000 angling hours to the general public, showing that even though it may have a non-support for a beneficial use, that it is still providing ample recreational opportunity to the general public. When we talk about these non-supporting parameters, we really like to consider these pollutants of concern rather than too polluted. We don't want people to think that just because a given water body has some non-supporting parameters or pollutants of concern, that it's too polluted to be able to use or get recreational value out of. We want people to understand that what that means is there is a potential pollutant of concern, a potential problem at that water body, and we as the state need to look into that to investigate it and see if we can mitigate that potential issue. Now getting back to that water quality criteria for E. coli, when that E. coli criteria was developed by EPA, that 235 number is based on 8 out of 1,000 humans developing an illness. So one thing we really want people to understand is when you're looking at water quality, especially on the human health side of things, it is very, very risk-based. That 235 E. coli number does not guarantee that someone's going to develop an illness or have symptoms or anything like that. It just shows that there's an associated risk with that number specifically. So now we're going to actually get into some of the non-support that we're seeing in some of the water bodies across South Dakota. This pie chart here is showing you the percent non-support for water quality parameters for streams across the state. As you can see, 63% of the non-support in streams comes down to E. coli and total suspended solids, 22% down to salinity, total dissolved solids, and conductivity, and then all the other parameters you see there make up the remaining 15%. So when we're looking at streams statewide, we know from this chart that our pollutants of concerns would be E. coli and total suspended solids. But one thing I do want to point out is we have multiple parameters in this table shown here that are under that 10% or even at 0%, showing that even though we may have a couple pollutants of concerns when it comes to our streams, we have multiple parameters that are meeting their water quality criteria and respectively meeting those beneficial uses. Now we're going to look at the same chart here, but this time we're looking at lakes in South Dakota. When we look at lakes in South Dakota, 83% of the non-support comes from the parameters chlorophyll A and mercury in fish tissue, and the remaining 17% would be the all remaining parameters. The interesting thing about this is when we're looking at chlorophyll A is going to be directly related to algae and nutrients. Mercury in fish tissue is a little harder to kind of deal with because a lot of the mercury in fish tissue non-support that we see in the state is actually from atmospheric deposition. So the thing about that is there's not really a lot we can do to try to mitigate that potential pollution source. And again, even though we have a couple pollutants of concerns, we still have multiple parameters we're sampling in lakes that are meeting water quality criteria. So now that we've talked about some of the non-support parameters that we're seeing are pollutants of concerns for streams and lakes, let's talk about that non-support, but let's look at it from reporting cycle. So this bar chart here shows you the percent non-support for lakes and streams from 2004 to the 2024 reporting cycle. And when you look at this graph, you may actually think to yourself that it appears that the percent non-support is getting worse over time. But that's not necessarily the case. One thing we really want people to understand is during these different reporting cycles, multiple reporting elements can change, such as more waters being sampled, different parameters being sampled, or even in situations where water quality criteria is changing. One thing I'd like to point out is from that 2012, 2014 time to 2016 and on, that second to third circle, it seems like we had a big jump up in that percent non-support. That's around the same exact time that we went from the FDA mercury criteria of 1 milligram per kilogram to the EPA recommended criteria of 0.3 milligrams. So something that is as simple as a water quality criteria change can actually make it seem like your non-support is getting worse from cycle to cycle without actually showing that the data itself from the previous cycle is getting worse. So that's kind of how we start looking at some of the waters. And now we're going to start talking about when we have pollutants of concerns, where are they coming from and what can we do to try to resolve those situations? The first thing we're going to do is we're going to start with point source pollution. Point source pollution being when you're able to identify the source that that pollutant is coming from. And many times an example of that would be a pipe entering a waterway. And a lot of the times this is dealt with a regulatory approach, working with these different municipalities and facilities to ensure through the permitting process that they're not just being compliant with Clean Water Act, but they're also compliant with state laws and water quality criteria as well. And some examples of this across the state are in CAFO permitting, wastewater effluent limits, or in some of our larger cities with more than 10,000 people, any MS4 activities that are going on. Now we're going to get into non-point source pollution, which is a little trickier to deal with because you don't have an actual identifiable source of where that pollutant is coming from. So a lot of the times this is a situation with heavy rainfall and runoff events. This is a very voluntary and incentive-based situation. More than 87% of the land area in South Dakota is occupied by farms and ranches. And what this tells us is that if we really want to make a difference when it comes to non-point source pollution, we need to be working with landowners and producers with boots on the ground efforts in order to actually combat this. And the nice thing about that is DNR has a great 319 non-point source program that manages multiple watershed projects just like this in order to implement best management practices and conservation practices on the ground in order to reduce that pollution. And none of this would be possible without multiple producer participation in the partnerships that we have across our state, such as ones with NRCS, conservation districts, GF&P, and more. And since 2014, non-point source projects across the state have actually led to multiple pollutant reductions, including 160,000 tons of sediment, 390,000 pounds of phosphorus, and 1.7 million pounds of nitrogen. So this map right here is actually showing some of the 319 non-point source projects we have across the state. If you look out on the western part of the state, we have our Belle Fourche project. In that Aberdeen area, in that purple, we have our South Central project. Up in the Watertown area, our Prairie Coteau project. And then down there in that Sioux Falls area, we have our Big Sioux project. And one thing I do want to say is there are two 319 projects not shown on this map. That would be our South Dakota Information and Education project and our South Dakota Soil Health project. And the reason that these two projects aren't actually shown on this map is because rather than being constricted to certain watersheds or areas, they're actually statewide projects. And here's another great example of a non-point source project that we have in the state that allows us to be able to reduce non-point source pollution. This is our Riparian Buffer Initiative contracted projects map as of June 3rd, 2026. And what RPI does is it allows us to partner with landowners and producers, and through the ideas of cost sharing, be able to implement best management practices on the ground in order to help try to reduce pollution in those areas. When we're looking at RBI currently, right now we have 130 active projects spanning over 3,500 acres, going more than 200 miles of coverage with roughly $7.3 million spent thus far. And now what we're actually going to do is we're going to look into a couple RBI practices that we've implemented in the fields. Here we have a couple pictures of the Blue Dog Lake shoreline. This was a project we did with Dade County Conservation District and Corey Zerbel. And what was done here is we actually did a fencing project on a shoreline of Blue Dog Lake to where you can see on that photo on the left. It was a pretty actively recreated shoreline with a lot of cattle going up and down. It was kind of beat up a little bit. And within putting that fence in, 2 months later, we were able to see shoreline and bank restabilization and have all of our native grasses come back with something as simple as just being able to put up a fence and kind of keeping cattle out of that area. And now here's another example of an RBI project, but this time we're looking at a row crop field buffer. In this situation, we have an agriculture field on the left and we have a kind of stream meandering through the picture. In the middle of those two, we have a 120-foot buffer. And what this buffer does is during those situations of heavy rainfall and runoff, it allows those nutrients and soils that are normally washed into that stream to actually stay on that landscape. And the nice thing about this is it doesn't just benefit the water quality of that stream, but it's also benefiting the nutrient load for that producer and landowner on those fields as well. So now that we've kind of talked about water quality, beneficial uses, support and non-support, and what that truly means, and where some of these pollutants of concerns are coming from and how we try to deal with them, we're going to actually look at an example of a real-time pollution reduction in South Dakota. On this map, I show you 4 different Big Sioux River E. coli segments and their percent exceedance for E. coli by year from 2012 to 2026. We chose these 4 Big Sioux River segments because they have a varying and large scale watershed that incorporates not just municipality and city life with potential point source problems, but also non-point source potential problems with a lot of agricultural life up there as well. So we have these 4 segments that are south of Sioux Falls to about north of Sioux City. And as you look at them in 2012, they were anywhere from about 25 to that 35 to 40% E. coli exceedance. And as we make our way to 2026, we're now looking at all 4 of those segments under 25% exceedance, starting to make that trend towards that 10% exceedance threshold. And this tells us that even though it may be a slow and gradual process, we are doing the right things when it comes to trying to manage and put conservation practices on the ground in order to reduce pollution in South Dakota's waters. Now, our 2026 Surface Water Quality Assessment Report was just finalized and recently approved by EPA. This is the first time that we've been doing this report that we went with a new story map report format. We used to put out an old 200-page document that was kind of cumbersome and a lot to go through. And with this new story map format, it facilitates the ability for us to cover a lot of information in a shorter period of time, and also provides South Dakota with a nice picturesque walkthrough of how you start with water quality criteria and beneficial uses, collect data, and then use that to compare it back to make water quality based decisions in the state. And the nice thing about this is that also allows us to link to a ton of additional information that we weren't able to do in the past. And you may be asking yourself, why such a big change? Why go from the old 200-page report and go to this new story map report format? The main reason was transparency. In the old 200-page document, we used to have an executive summary section that highlighted the percent of waters that were non-support for at least one of their beneficial uses. This was removed during this 2026 cycle, and it was something that we found rather problematic. When people would go through this report and look at that percentage, they would just assume that that's the percent of waters in South Dakota that are either unusable or not providing recreational value. And that's not necessarily the case like we talked about in this report. We want the audience to be able to go through the whole report and really see the data behind the decisions that we're making and why these decisions are the way they are. And with this being the first cycle that we're using this new reporting mechanism, we're really hoping it's a user-friendly and interactive application that the public is able to easily use and go through and really understand the problems that we have in South Dakota and why we have them. It also includes all of the raw data we use to make every water quality decision in the report, which is a first that we've ever done. So now the public can actually go through and see all of the data we used in order to make a certain water quality-based decision. And again, with this being such a new reporting style format, we're really hoping that as we go through more and more cycles in the future, we're able to make improvements on this report based on the public comment period. When it comes to a report like this, that 30-day public comment period is so crucial and important to us because it allows us to see what is and isn't working well in the report and where we can maybe make some changes to make sure that the people of South Dakota are really understanding what's going on with the water quality in their state. Thank you. And I'll now open up for questions.
Josh, that was excellent.
Thank you.
That was excellent. Being the chair of this board, I get a variety of calls, questions, concerns that come to me. And several dealt with the way the report had been done in the past.
Sure.
And this year's report.
Yeah.
And how this one does not identify specific polluters.
Sure.
And past ones did.
Mm-hmm.
And so then the questions arise, have they improved? Or what was the reasoning for removing them from being identified?
Sure.
Can you touch on that?
Sure. So when it comes to actually talking about the pollutants of concern and what is causing these and where it's coming from, these numbers and sources, they're actually still in the report. They're just not upfront in that executive summary section anymore. And the reason we did do this is because we felt like it was just doing a disservice, and a lot of people would read that 1-page, 1-2 executive summary and then not look at the rest of the report. These numbers have actually always been available in the basin descriptions, which is included as a map inside the story map. It's just something that we're no longer putting right up front and center. But it is also one of those things, with this being such a new reporting style format, these are the type of things we want to talk about and conversate with in order to see if it is something we do need to do in the future, and maybe in a situation add a specific page that talks about that still.
Other questions?
So Josh, that was excellent. I wish I could say that I understood it all. But one of the things that when you started out, you started out with a picture of Pactola.
Sure.
And I presume that, like E. coli has a hard time surviving in areas like a cold water lake like Pactola that
Sure.
has a lot of movement of water too.
Yep.
So temperature has a lot to do with what we're dealing with as far as E. coli and other things. And
It can in certain situations, and then also other agricultural drivers as well, and certain runoff events and rainfall for that year. And that's kind of the weird thing, is there's so many different things that go into just one of these parameters. It's not just like one thing that's like the driving factor for that, but multiple things as well.
okay, and I'm guilty on the executive summary.
No, that's okay. That's okay.
If I could touch base just a minute on the temperature of Pactola, sorry, Paul Lorenzen, Department of Ag and Natural Resources. Is it all right if I speak to this question? Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So temperature, the temperature violation in Pactola is associated with aquatic life use. And so that would be more of a detriment to the cold water fishery in Pactola. The data, based on the data, there's the upper water column, or the first few feet, 10 feet of the water column tends to be warm. Though I think Pactola is 100 and some feet deep. And so there's plenty of cold water habitat. So it's not an issue to this point in terms of trout survival, trout recruitment, but it is a concern that the upper part of the temperature is getting warmer. And so it exceeds the criteria, the water quality criteria. And so that's why it's listed as non-support or impaired for temperature.
I presume that with drought that we're dealing with throughout the state, that can have a big impact in what we're talking about.
That certainly does. Yeah. I mean, I think when you have those years where Pactola is full, even though it's a flow through system, the temperature tends to improve. You don't see as far down of a temperature violations as far down in the water column. The lower the water, the warmer the water body is going to get. So, but it's been kind of I don't want to call it chronic, but temperature has been probably listed or a non-sport for probably at least 3 or 4 cycles, probably somewhere in that neighborhood. So we've been seeing that warmer level, and it's not something that I think is too alarming. I mean, it's hard to keep, for temperature to meet, for cold water, it's hard for temperature to meet that upper few feet of the water column. But what's important in Pactola is there's a lot of depth and it's really cold at the bottom. And so, but a pollutant of concern for sure. And there are things that the Forest Service and the forestry folks are working on in terms of canopy for Spring Creek, keeping the water cool coming from Spring Creek, coming into the Pactola. And so there are things we can do to mitigate that, but it's going to get hot some summers, and water fluctuations also can have an impact. But
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, John.
Good questions. I've got another one. The Big Sioux River, you show south of Sioux Falls.
Yep.
Where you actually have over the past 2-3 years, you show an improvement.
Yep.
In the quality of that water.
Correct.
Okay, how does it look north of Sioux Falls or across the rest of the state? Are you seeing stagnant isn't the right word, but it's a fitting word. Across the rest of the state, are you seeing similar results from years past, or improvement, or degradation?
so that's an excellent question. I wish that we had time to go through and look at the trend analysis for everything. I put those numbers together for a legislative meeting during the 26th legislative meeting, and I thought, where's a place that's of great concern where you have a large agricultural watershed, and then you have the largest municipality in the state. So all these things going on, and that's why we gave that example. And the actual report format doesn't focus on trend analysis, but those are things that we're talking about in our program that we want to try to provide to the public. We're looking to do some basin-wide assessments to take data from the past and look at those kinds of trends. But we did not do it on a larger scale for this reporting cycle, but it is something we want to do. I think we're at a point, when the process first started, so the first integrated report was in 1998. It was pretty rudimentary. Things have kind of improved. It's been pretty consistent since 2004. And so now we've gotten to a point 20 years later where we can go back and start to look at that kind of stuff. It wasn't really on our radar before because we're just getting as much data as we can just to keep the cycles going year to year. But yes, with 20 years of data, we really do need to go back and start looking at those trend analysis. I'm thinking I don't want to call the Big Sioux below Sioux Falls the worst situation, but if things are improving there, I can't imagine we're not going to see it elsewhere too. But it'll be variable depending on the water body. So, but we're working on it, or we're going to work on it. So.
Excellent report. I mean, it was very good. Now, can you do anything about the Minot Lake Dam and the upstream? Thank you very much. Really appreciate your time, and thank you for the report. So, thank you. And we're going to play soccer later, so just hang on. Item 17, upcoming meetings. Tina.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Our next meeting will be in September, tentatively scheduled for September 24th. We're thinking a one-day meeting. Could possibly be a morning, afternoon. It just really depends. Some items that potentially will come up, funding applications, that's always. Possible ARPA amendments, projects are closing out, so we're getting possible funds reverted back, and we want to get those, as Andy mentioned during the meeting, reallocated as quickly as possible so we can have it all spent by the end of the year. During our last board meeting, we talked about Senate Bill 231, which created the Water Infrastructure Development Fund, and the need for rules for that program. And we are hopefully going to be going through the rulemaking process at that time and having a public hearing. It will also be time to do a public hearing for the Brownsfield program. That's what we do annually in September. We also provide our interim bond committee report to the board for approval before that goes in front of the interim bond committee. Our annual review of open meeting rules comes up after the July 1st, beginning of the new state fiscal year, and also the election of officers. So, like I said, could potentially be a full day meeting. I don't anticipate 2 days. It could be a longer day.
Thank you, Kim. Item number 18, adjourn. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Motion Jennings.
Second, Lanning.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor with an aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. We are adjourned.
Thank you.